In 2008, a group of ZANU PF militias in the growth point of Cherera in Masvingo province, they approached an MDCT office that was post the period between the March elections and the June runoff. They approached the office, they looked it from the outside, they set it on fire. People that were inside worked for the party they burned, some to death, a few survived. I met one myself with a disfigured face, horribly burnt. Welcome listeners. Today I am going to talk about the triangulation or symbiosis between ZANU PF, the military, and electoral capture in Zimbabwe. We have been talking about electoral capture in our previous episode, the one about 2 weeks ago, and now we are going to talk about the aspect how the military factors into the capture, and why does it so seem like the military is tied up to ZANU PF, and what is the role of the military in aiding and abetting electoral capture in Zimbabwe. So the relationship between ZANU PF and the military is crucial to understanding Zimbabwe's political and electoral landscape. I am going to explore the relationship, its historical roots, its development, and how it ties into electoral capture. One of the keys to unlocking the puzzle is the two-faced nature or two-faced character of ZANU PF. It is a political and military union. It's an inheritance from the Liberation War days when the party established a military wing, which they called the ZANLA, the Zimbabwe African National Liberation Army, to prosecute the armed struggle for independence. Now, this resulted in a brand of civil-military relations where the military was subordinated to the party, or at least to the leadership of the party. While this might seem appropriate during a guerrilla war, it is incompatible with democratic modes of governance, whereby the soldiers themselves must be under objective civilian control. Soldiers belong to the barracks, they don't belong to civilian institutions. It is then crucial to understand that ZANU PF or ZANU wasn't just back then, before it became PF, wasn't just a political party with a military wing. It was fundamentally a political military liberation movement. Its military wing was integral to its identity, its strategy, and leadership structure. Two factors that explains the development of the symbiosis between ZANU PF as we know it today and the military. The first one is there was a leadership overlap. So many key figures in ZANU's political leadership, they simultaneously held high command positions within the Zimbabwe African National Liberation Army, ZANLA. Robert Mugabe, while being the political leader of ZANU, he relied heavily on commanders like Josiah Tongogara. This created an ingrained culture where political and military authority were intertwined. Right. The second one is ideology. The liberation struggle, it fostered an ideology where military struggle was seen as the primary legitimate path to power and a necessary means to defend the revolution against internal and external enemies. The mindset carried over into the post-independence era, as we shall see as the presentation proceed. Right. So after independence, there was a need then to create what was called the Zimbabwe National Army, what is now known as the Zimbabwe National Army. So this process, it required integrating three separate forces: ZANU Zanla, ZAPU Zipra, which was Zimbabwe People's Revolutionary Army, and the Rhodesian Security Forces. While integration occurred, ZANU PF strategically ensured that Zanla commanders and loyalists, they secured key positions with the Zimbabwe National Army command structure. Former Rhodesian Security Forces RSF members were initially integrated but gradually marginalized or retired. Then came the Gukurahundi massacres. So this is the development, how ZANU PF and the military became so tied to each other. So came the Gukurahundi massacres of 1983 to 1987. This is perhaps the starkest early example of using the military outside of the normal Zimbabwe National Army command structure and reporting directly to the Prime Minister's office, who was Robert Mugabe. So they were deployed in Matabeleland and the Midlands provinces. These were the strongholds of the main rival to ZANU. So this was the stronghold of ZAPU. The political objective of doing this was the operation targeted what they termed dissidents. It was a very brutal campaign against ZAPU structures and the Bele civilian population who were perceived to support the ZAPU. It aimed to crush political opposition and force ZAPU into submission. This we will do a separate episode on Gukurahundi. It's quite an emotive subject that we can go into today, but for the purposes of this submission, that's all there is to talk about for now. And then, apart from the political objective, where ZANU PF used the army to bring into submission ZAPU, it showed also that ZANU could use the military as an instrument. The soldiers acted as ZANU PF's blunt instrument, committing widespread atrocities. This demonstrated decisively that the state's military power could and would be used to eliminate political threats to ZANU's dominance. Now this cemented the military's role as a protector of the party at the risk of the state. Now, how then does ZANU PF and the military how do they then capture the elections in favor of ZANU PF? It is also worth mentioning that after 1987, or just around 1987, that's when ZANU and ZAPU joined together to form what is now known as ZANU PF, Zimbabwe African National Union Patriotic Front, the party that we have grown to know now today as it is. So the elections in Zimbabwe have been securitized as the ZANU PF started to face stronger electoral challenges. So senior military commanders began making very public statements, particularly before elections. For example, in 2002, service chiefs declared that to this end, let it be known that the highest office in the land is a straitjacket whose occupant is expected to observe the objectives of the liberation struggle. We will therefore not accept, let alone support or salute anyone with a different agenda that threatens the very existence of our sovereignty. This was captured in the Zimbabwe Independent of 2 February, of 1 February, I mean, of 2 January 2002, of 11 January 2002. Now, this was viewed as a veiled threat to MDC's Morgan Tsvangirai and explicitly positioned the military as gatekeepers of political power. Loyal to ZANU PF's revolutionary legacy rather than constitutional process. Right, then the 2008 elections as a case in point, you would realize that electoral capture in Zimbabwe, it exists because a coalition of political and security elites, they stand ready and willing to employ violence to perpetuate their state control. The dampening of the voices as a means of, we spoke about this about 3 weeks ago, where we spoke of how emigration has resulted in dampening of the voices of those who are remaining in Zimbabwe. We saw that even during the Geza's call for people to come out and demonstrate, how people did not come out. So that's what we defined as the dampening of the voice. So as a means of registering, because once you do that, you become a target and so forth. We mentioned about journalists getting arrested, political activists fleeing away after being incarcerated. So that resulted in what we described as the dampening of the voice as a means of registering political dissent. Now this has left only voting as one of the very few ways to promote political change in Zimbabwe. So in a proper electoral system, 2008, it presented conditions which were very fertile for a protest vote. And in March 2008, the outcome where ZANU PF lost heavily to Morgan Tsvangirai's MDCT. This invited the wrath of the security forces. The 2008 elections will go down as one of the most violent and fear-ridden episodes in the annals of Zimbabwe's history. Now, easily characterized as a reign of terror. To the students of history, remember the reign of terror in the French Revolution, during the French Revolution. Systematic state-orchestrated violence was deployed to preserve power of the regime that had demonopolized it for the preceding 28 years since independence. So in 2008, the first round of elections, ZANU PF lost the presidential, parliamentary and civic elections to Morgan Tsvangirai's MDCT. Presidential results were announced after 34 days. And this was unprecedented in post-independence Zimbabwe. Tsvangirai, however, according to the official results, he failed to achieve the legal threshold of 50% plus one additional vote. Now, this compelled a constitutionally mandated runoff election. The second round was scheduled for 27 June 2008, but the interim between March and June was a dark hour in the country's political history and a sad lesson in the regime's quest for durability. ZANU PF party-led electoral contest in March, and then it failed to win elections against Tsvangirai's MDCT, and then they declared failure. Then the Securocrats, in the form of JOC, the Joint Operations Command, then they took over. For the security sector, the June runoff election was like a continuation of the liberation war. It was a militarized moment which reduced the contest to a battle between the bullet and the ballot. The organ that played a central and strategic role in this drama was the Joint Operations Command, which comprised of security chiefs from the army, the air force, the police, the intelligence, and the prison services. All in all, there should be 6 heads of those state institutions. So the framework of the campaign of intense violence and intimidation running up to the June runoff, it was called Operation Makafutira Papi, meaning Operation Who Did You Vote For? And was reportedly given its blessing by Robert Mugabe himself, who said, "Our votes must go in hand with our guns. After all, any vote shall have been a product of the gun." That was Robert Mugabe himself. Major General Engelbert Rugeje, we spoke about him when we spoke about the prospects of General Chiwenga in succeeding Emerson Mnangagwa, and we said in the Politburo, the only guy that is likely to support Chiwenga is Engelbert Rugeja, who is in the Politburo. But now things have changed a little bit, but maybe that will not make much difference to the prospects. General Sanyatwe, who is now a Minister of Sports, so probably is also now in the Politburo by virtue of him being a minister. So that adds also another vote to Chiwenga, which also will not make much difference. So Rugeja said the country came through the bullet, not the pencil. Therefore, it will not go by your X, which signifies the voting mark. In many other instances, soldiers handed villagers with bullets which were wrapped in envelopes with the message, "You have seen the bullets, we have enough for each and every one of you, so beware or be careful." 10 days before the runoff, Mugabe endorsed what the soldiers have been preaching all along. He said, "We are not going to give up our country because of a mere X. How can a ballpoint fight with a gun?" Now, true to their word, ZANU PF and the army made the 2008 runoff a terrifying period, an unforgettable experience for Zimbabweans in many urban and rural areas and the villages. Consequently, Morgan Tsvangirai dropped out of the runoff. He took refuge in the Dutch embassy in Harare. Now, that teaches us that ZANU PF will only succumb to transparent, free and fair elections under severe political pressure from both internal and external forces, because they lost this election 2008. They tried to tamper with the results, but not successfully enough. But successfully enough to stop Morgan Tsvangirai from being the president, which forced then a constitutionally mandated runoff. So they can lose through an election. So now this brings in the spotlight why it's very important for Zimbabwe to hold free, fair and credible elections. So the role of the military in 2008, it ensured that ZANU PF stayed in power. The nature in which the runoff was conducted was such that it was never considered an election due to the nature of and the extent of the violence that was employed to ensure that people voted for ZANU PF. I remember people in Zaka. I met some of them who were saying what people were saying now during that period was the runoff. People were now saying, let the election just come and let's vote for ZANU PF so that they remain in power. Because if not voting for them result in such brutality, and then there is no point. Nothing is worth more than life. Those were the sentiments that were going around. So the role of the military as kingmaker, that's when then it was exposed. Not only in Zimbabwe, but then in 2017, during the coup, not so coup, what happened then? As factional battles within ZANU PF intensified post-2013 elections, key military figures became crucial power brokers. Their allegiance often determined the balance of power. Operation Restore Legacy of November 2017 was a military intervention which led to Mugabe's resignation and Emmerson Mnangagwa's ascension to power. While framed as targeting criminals around the president, it was fundamentally the military stepping in to resolve a ZANU PF succession crisis in favor of its preferred candidate. Now, the event starkly demonstrated that the military in Zimbabwe saw itself as the ultimate guarantor and arbiter of power within ZANU PF system. Now, post-Mugabe era, does the role of the military endure post-2017? Yes, we see the continuity of the symbiotic relationship. Military figures in government, following the coup by the military elites, notably General Chiwenga, took up positions in government, is now the vice president post-2017. Now this cemented the direct presence of the military in the political administration. He's not the only one. We had several ministers who had come from who were military generals who had played a key role in the 2017 coup. Sadly, the majority of them are no longer alive today. And then we have seen also continued repression post-2017, deployment of military against post-election protests. In August 2018, where at least 4 people lost their lives. And we have seen there were few protests in January 2019, resulting in civilian deaths. Now that showed that Mnangagwa's administration, despite initial promises of change, would continue to rely on the military to suppress dissent and maintain order in ZANU PF's terms. Then also enduring structures like the joke, it continues to operate even today, and the economic interests of the security elite remain intertwined with the state and the ruling party. Thank you so much for coming to my episode. I hope to see you again next week. If you have any contributions, any questions, let's continue the conversation in the comment section, and please don't forget to subscribe and share. Thank you.